Hello everyone and welcome back. So in today's social science session we will be discussing an important topic, that is the globe, latitudes and longitudes. So as the name indicates, obviously in this chapter we will be talking about our very own earth, that is the shape of the earth, and we'll be talking about the imaginary lines which are there on the earth, right? So let's begin with the first point, that is the shape of the earth. So the shape of the earth is not absolutely spherical, it is not circular, right? It is flat at the poles and little fat at the center, right? So if we see the entire earth, we see that at the poles it's slightly flat, right? The poles are flat, and the the center part is slightly bulged, right? So if we see the if we see the diameter, the polar diameter is around 12,712 kilometers, and the circumference is 40,000 kilometers, right? This is at the poles. And when talking about the center of the earth, it is slightly more, that is 12,756 kilometer, that's the diameter, and the circumference is 40,090 kilometers. So this proves that the earth is slightly flat at the poles, right, at both the ends, that is at the north end as well as at the south end. Next, we talk about the globe. So what is a globe? Globe is a model of the earth. It's the exact earth but smaller in size. It helps us to make various studies about the earth, the location of places and all, right? So what's a globe? It's a model of the earth. After that, the next thing that we learn is that the earth is not fixed at a place. It keeps spinning, right? I repeat, the earth keeps spinning, and the point at which it spins, that is called axis. So this is axis. Axis is the point on which the earth spins, right? The earth rotates or spins upon an imaginary axis. So this is an imaginary line drawn, and the earth goes round, right? It spins on its axis. So I hope this much is clear to everyone. So proceeding further, we find two poles. As I told you just now, the two poles which are slightly flat, the pole which is there at the north, this is called North Pole, and the one at the south is called the South Pole. So the pole pointing towards the pole star. Remember, in our previous sessions we've talked about the pole star, that is the North Star. So that is the North Pole, and the pole opposite to it is called the South Pole. Further, we see the entire, we have drawn various imaginary lines on the earth to make our study easier, to locate places and to make our study easier and better, right? So let us first talk about the equator. So equator is the imaginary line which runs from the center of the earth, and this has divided the earth into two equal halves. The part which is above the equator, this has been termed as northern hemisphere, northern, and the part which lies to the south of the equator, this is north and this is south, isn't it? So this is south. So the part which lies at the south of the equator, that is called southern hemisphere. So I hope this much is clear to all of you. This is the equator. Equator runs through the center and it divides the earth into two equal halves. Remember, two equal halves, that is the northern hemisphere on top and the southern hemisphere down below the earth. Next we will talk about the other imaginary lines which are there on the surface of the earth. So we have already talked about axis on which the earth spins, and equator which divides the earth into two equal parts, that is northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Now now let us talk about the other imaginary lines which are there on the surface of the earth. Remember, all these are imaginary lines, right? So we've already talked about North Pole, which is 90 degree north, South Pole 90 degrees south, and the center line equator, this is 0 degree. So equator divides the earth into two equal halves, that is northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Now apart from these, there are other imaginary lines, right? So the imaginary lines which run from west to east, or you can say east to west, these are known as parallels, or they are also known as latitudes. So latitudes or parallels, these are the imaginary lines which run from east to west or west to east, right? And they are at a distance of 1 degree from each other. So in the northern hemisphere we find 90 such lines, and in the southern hemisphere also we find 90 such lines. So altogether, how many parallels or how many latitudes are there? 90 in the northern hemisphere, 90 in the southern hemisphere, plus 1 equator, that is 181, right? So altogether there are 181 latitudes, right, or 181 parallels. They all are at 1 degree from each. The distance is 1 degree, right? The distance between them is 1 degree. Now apart from this, we have lines running from north to south also. So these lines running from north to south, they are called meridians. These are called meridians or lines of longitude, right? So I hope all of you are clear with the lines of latitude and longitude. Next we talk about a grid. So what is a grid? Can we see these lines of latitudes and the lines of longitude? They form a network, isn't it? They form a net kind of a thing. This is called grid. And what is the use of grid? To locate places on the globe, right? So with the help of the grid, we find out the location of the places. Now when we talk about the latitudes, these latitudes, it's the angular distance, right, north or south of the equator. So the latitudes are, they lie either to the north or the south of the equator, and it is measured in degrees. So we can see I have already written 90 degree. North pole is at 90 degree north. South pole is 90 degree south. So it's measured in degrees. Each degree is divided into 60 equal parts called minutes, and each minute is further divided into 60 equal parts called seconds. So the equator represents the 0 degree latitude. See, the equator is the 0 degree latitude. And therefore, all parallels north of the equator are called north latitudes, and they are all marked 0 degree, 1 degree, 2 degree. They all are marked, right? And the north pole is 90 degrees. So there are 90 lines on the in the northern hemisphere. Similarly, 90 lines in the southern hemisphere as well. So 90 plus 90, 180, and one equator, that is 181. So I hope this is clear to you. So cities and towns that are near to the equator, they are said to be in the low latitudes. I repeat, low latitudes. And the places away from the equator, that is near the poles, they are said to be in high latitudes. So equator is the longest parallel. So when we look at the earth, we see this is the broadest part. So obviously the equator, the line of equator which is running from this area is the longest one. So equator is the longest latitude. Next, let us know about the important parallels, that is the important lines of latitude. So as it is equator, very important, it's the center line which divides the earth into northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. And what is the measurement? It's 0 degree, right? Then comes Tropic of Cancer, which lies at 23.5 degree north, and Arctic Circle, which lies at 66.5 degree north. Similarly, in the southern hemisphere, Tropic of Capricorn lies at 23.5 degree south, and Antarctic Circle lies at 66.5 degree south. So these are all the important lines of latitude, right? And we can see the measurement as well. All the lines in the northern hemisphere, they are marked as N, that is north, and the lines in the southern hemisphere, they are marked as S, which means southern hemisphere. So northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Now let us talk about the heat zones. So the area lying between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer in the north and Tropic of Capricorn in the south. So we can take this area, that is the area lying between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. This is the hottest zone, right? I repeat, this is the hottest zone, and it has been named as torrid zone, right? So this area is the torrid zone. Then next is the area between Tropic of Cancer to Arctic Circle in the north and Tropic of Capricorn and Antarctic Circle in the south. So these two areas, this area and this area, this is known as temperate zone. I repeat, temperate zone. So in the northern hemisphere, it is known as north temperate zone, and in the southern hemisphere, it is known as south temperate zone, right? Now, in the torrid zone, when we talk about the sun rays, they fall directly in this area, that is on the torrid zone. Therefore, that's the hottest part, right? Now, in the temperate zone, north temperate zone, as well as the south temperate zone receive slanting rays of the sun, so it's less hot, right? And next we talk about the area which lies between the Arctic Circle and North Pole in the northern hemisphere, and Antarctic Circle and South Pole in the southern hemisphere. So this area in the north is known as North Frigid Zone, and in the south it's known as South Frigid Zone. So as the name indicates, frigid zone, it means that throughout the year it remains covered with ice. It's the coldest zone, right? So the places at the poles that they remain, these are the places near the poles, and they remain frozen throughout the year. So this shows that the frigid zone remains under ice throughout the year. So both frigid zones are located at the greatest distance from the sun. These areas receive extreme slanting rays, very faint rays of the sun, and therefore they are cold throughout the year, right? Now next we talk about Africa. Just a little information about Africa. So this is the only continent. Africa is the only continent through which all three major parallels pass. That is the Tropic of Cancer, Equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn, right? So with this, I wind up my session here only. In the next session, we will talk about the meridians or the lines of longitude. So thank you so much.